Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. And if this is your first time watching, if this is your first time joining us, we want to welcome you. We want to thank you that you've taken your time just to join us for this live stream. And again, we hope you enjoy it. What we do every Saturday is just talk a little bit about the Bible. Talk about different themes, talk about things that are currently happening in our lives right now. And the goal is to see what God has for us, what God is trying to say, what God can possibly say to us during this time of trial. And, the world around us is changing. And this past week, I went out on a grocery run with Angie. And, I've noticed all of these changes. I haven't gone out too much the past couple of weeks. But now that I did go out, there's less cars. We went to Target and we went to a couple other stores, and there's just not a lot of people in stores. Everyone's wearing masks, everyone's wearing gloves, everyone's keeping their distance as they're in line. And, even driving, being on the streets, there's no traffic anywhere. There's not as many cars out on the road as it was before. And, I also think that people have just been home for too long that they've forgotten how to drive. I almost, someone almost hit me 3 times this week as I was driving. And, I'm telling myself, these people are just, maybe they've lost their touch. They've lost practice with driving. Again, it just goes to show how things are changing. I was looking at a meme this week comparing, any type of run out to a store or a grocery run as The Walking Dead, and it felt exactly that way. It felt like we were out for survival and we were out trying to come back home as quickly as possible. And you freak out sometimes. You look at everything that's going on, all of these changes, how different the world is right now, and it's just astonishing. It's eye-opening, and it's like, we never expected things to be like that this year. And despite of all of these changes, it's a trying time for all of us. It's a trying time for everyone around the world. And it has been for me. Last week I was sharing with everyone that my wife and I are going through some things. We're going through some trials of our own as we're expecting our newborn, our first son. And even hospital visits are different. Angie and I had to watch an ultrasound through FaceTime because I couldn't even go to the appointment. And when my wife gives birth, things are going to be different. We won't be having visitors at the hospital. It's just going to be my wife and I. Again, it's not how we expected. It's not how we envisioned it. It's not what we had planned. But, because of all of these trials, because of everything that has changed, this is just the new norm. This is the new reality for us. And just like myself, I'm sure you have a ton of questions. I know you've probably been asking yourself, why do we have to go through these trials? What's the point? What's the purpose? More specifically, you might be asking yourself, why me? It might be a question you've asked yourself before. I know I've asked God plenty of times when things have come about in my life, and I ask God and I tell him, God, why me? Out of all people, why me? And, we're all experiencing a trial of some sort right now. And lately, I've actually been intrigued with this word in the Bible, because of what is going on, because of everything that has changed in the world around us. I've thought about this more, and I've asked myself, what does the Bible have to say about trials? What does the Bible have to say about tough times? What can God tell us through the Bible that can help us overcome these trials, that can help us and give us comfort through these tough situations? And, last week we saw in James chapter 1, verse 2, as we studied that verse, we find this word. We find this word trial. And, what's interesting, I mentioned this last week, is that in the Greek, the word for trial is the same exact word for temptation. So, as you can see, you can use this word interchangeably as you're reading the Bible. And another place that we find this word that really caught my attention, that took me to study this verse, was in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 10 and verse 13. where Paul is talking to the Corinthian church, and he says this. He says in verse 13 is where he says, no temptation. Again, we can interchangeably use that word as trial or temptation. It says, no trial has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tried beyond what you are able. But with the temptation or trial, with the trial, will also make a way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. What Paul is telling us here is that everything that you're going through at this moment, everything that you're dealing with at this moment is not out of the ordinary. You know, it is not something you can't handle. And that's the good news. That's the positive side that we find in this text. And, you know, he's saying that if you are experiencing some type of trial, God knows you can handle it. God knows you can overcome it, and which is why you are going through it. And a lot of you guys might be saying, you know, okay, I might be able to handle what I'm going through, but wouldn't life be a bit easier? Wouldn't life be maybe even better if we didn't have to deal with trials at all? You know, what's the point? Why are we going through this? You know, some people might be asking themselves, why am I out of work? Why am I struggling financially? Why am I dealing with different changes, not only in my life, but in my family's life? Or why am I stuck with so many decisions right now? I don't know what to do. I don't know what decision to make. Why am I stuck right now? Or more specifically, why are we dealing with this virus? Out of all years, why 2020? What's the point, right? What's the point with the virus? What's the point with these trials that we're going through? And, you know, if we look at what we studied last week in the book of James, again, chapter 1, verse 2, we see that James actually gives us a quick explanation as to why. You know, last week we saw that joy, trials, faith, patience, they're all interconnected. You know, one word relates to the other, and one word affects the other. You know, we talked about finding joy in our trials, because as we find joy in our trials, it actually exercises our faith in God's plan. And part of our faith is also being patient with God, trusting Him that He has a plan for our life. You know, if you want to know more about that, you can find that video on YouTube. But this time we're actually going to talk about, what are the trials there for? Why are we going through trials? And the book of James tells us that trials in our lives, the point of all these trials and situations in our life, is because God is giving us an opportunity to grow. You know, these trials are God's opportunity for you to grow, because you see, victories cannot come without battles. And we see that all over the Bible. You know, let's take the story of Joseph, for example. You know, we know that Joseph overcame so much. You know, he was despised by his brothers. He was thrown into a pit by his brothers. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. And we know that he was deceived, and he spent some time in prison, and he became one of the most powerful rulers in Egypt. But before he got to that position, before he became a ruler, he did have to go through prison. And so many people want to get to the palace without going through prison. And, you know, your trials are your opportunity to grow. Joseph's time in prison, we can say that Joseph's time in the pit, Joseph's time working for Potiphar, and, you know, being deceived by Potiphar's wife, being in prison, all of that time was Joseph's opportunity for growth. And once again, we see this all over the Bible. We see, for example, the story of Jesus in Luke chapter 4. We see that Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days, and it was a very trying time for him. You know, if you read the story, Luke tells us that Jesus was hungry, and Satan knew that he was hungry. And Satan approached him and he said, you know, turn these stones into bread. And apart from that temptation, you know, we see that Satan tempts him 2 more times. And again, why was Jesus tempted? We see actually in Luke chapter 4 that after all of the 3 temptations, Jesus comes out of that temptation or that trial filled with the Spirit. We see that after Jesus overcame, he came out of that trial in a better place. He came out of that trial filled with the Spirit. And another example is the story of Job. We see that, Job suffered a lot. And if you read that story, if you read the 40 something chapters that we find in the book of Job, we see that, Job was a rich man. Job was a faithful man. Job was someone who respected and feared God. But then from one day to the next, he loses it all. And it was probably the toughest, the worst time of his life, a time of trial, a time of hardship, a time of pain. But at the end of his story, we see that God blessed him. God blessed him with more than what he had prior to this trial. So we see that that tough time for Job was his opportunity for growth. You see, temptations and trials, they build you up. They produce good qualities, such as endurance, and they help you mature, and trials help you to grow. And your trials are the opportunity that God is giving you to grow. But again, just as we said last week, a lot of these things are much more easier said than done. So let's go back to the book of 1 Corinthians. And we see that 1 Corinthians chapter 10, again, verse 13, other than saying that whatever we're going through is nothing out of the ordinary, what we're going through is something that we can handle, that verse also tells us that God will provide a way of escape. What does that mean? If we quickly glance at the verse and we take a look at it and skim it, that can easily mean, and we can easily interpret that to mean that, God can give us a shortcut. We can cut through an alley and say, I'm not dealing with that, But what exactly does that mean? Is God the shortcut? Is he giving me a way of escape to run from my trials? Is it a way for me to avoid hardship or to avoid pain? All of us, I think, would love that. All of us would love to not have to deal with all those trying times in our lives. But is there a way that God can make all of that disappear? And I would say definitely yes. God is more than capable and powerful to eliminate any type of trial, any type of hardship that you're dealing with right now. But why would God do that? Why would God pull you from this opportunity of growth? Why would God pull you from that? So we see that what Paul is talking about here, Paul saying that he provides the way of escape. If we look closely, it means that with every trial, God will always provide an alternative. God doesn't give us an escape from our trial, but what God does is give us an escape from making the wrong decision. God might very well want you to experience this trial, go through a hardship, because he knows you're going to grow from it. And, our character, our person, and even our life can be built up or torn down depending on the decisions we make when we encounter these hardships. So what does God want me to know today? We read 1 Corinthians 10:13, and we think about it. What does God have to say to me with this verse today? And what God wants you to know is that the trial that you are going through has a purpose. He wants us to see that he has a plan for allowing that trial in your life. And again, to close things up, I want to leave everyone with 3 things that really stuck up to me, and maybe these are things that you can live by. And the first one is your trial has a purpose. Think about it right now. Take a couple seconds to think, what am I going through right now? What am I struggling with right now? What are my hardships at the moment? Or what is bringing me pain right now? And think about it. And I want you to know that God has a plan with what you're going through. God has a plan with everything that you're experiencing, whether if it has to do with the virus, whether if it has to do with your finances, or if it has to do with problems in your family. God has a purpose for all of that. The second thing is that God has allowed this trial in your life because he wants you to grow. God is so merciful, God is so loving that he provides this opportunity. He provides this time for us to grow and become better human beings, to become better Christians, to become better people. And the third thing is that God is your way out. If you ask God for help, He will help you. And better yet, He is going to give you an alternate route for you to make the best decision in what you're dealing with right now. So God's way of escape is keeping you from making that bad decision. We always encounter these decisions, especially when we're in hardship. Sometimes when we're going through trials, we take extreme measures to get away from them, to eliminate our trials. But what God is saying is, you don't have to take extreme measures. What you can do is you can trust in me and you can give me a chance, and I will help you out throughout the way. I will be a very good support system, and you won't need anything else because you have me. Again, I want also everyone to remember that there's a process that is part of your progress. We're all looking to progress in life. We're all looking to grow in life. But in order to grow and to get to where we want to be, there is a process. And part of this process is just going through and experiencing trials and hardships. So what I want to leave everyone with this morning is, embrace your circumstances, embrace your trials, but most importantly, trust in God. Don't worry if you're going through hardships. Don't worry if you're going through pain. Don't worry if you don't know what to do with your life right now. Embrace all of that. Embrace those thoughts. Embrace those circumstances. And again, trust in God. Because although it looks like this situation is going to go on for the long run, and maybe the virus isn't going to be something that is no longer a problem for us in the near future, but that doesn't matter. As long as we trust in God, as long as we take advantage of the opportunity that God is giving us to grow, we will be all right. So thank you guys for watching. Again, remember, whatever you're going through, I don't know what you're going through, but whatever you're going through, trust in God. He is in control, and he is definitely more ready and willing to help you out. So again, I want to remind everyone, every Saturday we'll be here at 11:15. Don't forget to join us, tune in, tell your friends about it, share our post. And if you want to follow us on social media, we do have a YouTube channel. We have a Facebook page, of course, and we have an Instagram page. So you can search us up at Lighthouse Lynn, and you'll be able to find us on all social media platforms. And I also want to promote our new podcast. We started a podcast last Friday. If you go on Spotify, you search up A Christian Minute, you'll be able to find our podcast where we talk about different things. Just like we do here, we talk about different topics, such as, we talked about God's judgment 2 weeks ago or last week. Yesterday, we talked about fear. So, maybe if you have time and you want to dig deep into these topics, check it out. If you like it, give it a follow. And once again, we'll be here every Saturday at 11:15. And once again, don't lose hope. Stay strong, keep your head up, and trust in God. Thanks, guys, and God bless.